Jules! We finally got to see some Jules cards in play, and my god, it was fun. We had some cookies dealing 96 feed. It was actually insane. Reynad got slapped by a cookies and ice cube build from an opposing Jules player. Alright, Stell's items. They are kind of all over the place, so don't worry too much about the actual pictures. We'll just go through what the items are and what they do. So starting with a blowtorch every 5 seconds for burn. If I remember rightly, this one was channeled, supposedly. That might have been an old tooltip, though, so we'll just stick with the 5 seconds of 4 burn at the moment. I think Gregory confirmed that that was an old tooltip. So 5 seconds for 4 burn. That's alright. 5 seconds is quite short. It could trigger some other stuff. Bon Voyage every 9.8 seconds, at least. Deal damage equal to 3 times your altitude. And when you use a weapon, gain 1 altitude. It's a weapon, it's a vehicle, which is Stell's thing. She is a sort of aeronaut, an engineer. She builds things, she flies things. She has vehicles as her subtype. 3 times your altitude. This could be interesting. We haven't seen quite how high altitude can get yet. But you're at least looking at sort of like 20, 30, easily able to reach. So dealing 3 times that, not bad, not bad. That's close to a starting character's health. Karakara, every 10 seconds, deal 20 damage. When you cross over 10 altitude, this gains 10 damage for the fight. Weapon and vehicle. This is one that we saw in the Discord, and it looks a lot of fun. If you are able to, it was confirmed that it's both when you go past 10 altitude and below. So if you somehow manage to sort of make a build that just ticks up and down over it, and you can build this thing up to do a decent chunk of damage, it probably will only trigger once in a fight, but if someone's going to sandstorm you, it'll trigger a couple times. Might get some considerate damage out. It's going to struggle against big max health builds, but otherwise, it could one-shot someone. Flash Grenade. Christ almighty. Which is a 4-second, 1 ammo, 12 damage in 12-second days. I thought this card was much better when I saw it in the stream the other day, but it's only got 1 ammo, which makes me think it's not quite as OP. Because this is a Stelle item. If you can get it with Vanessa and add some ammo into it, awesome. It's still good. You're right. It's still pretty good. 12-second days. That's a lot. That's 12 seconds where their cooldowns are charging half as quickly. And 12 damage is nothing to shake a stick at. It gives 6 more seconds to Stelle. Yeah, exactly. A lot of what Stelle is about seems to be prolonging her early game, so her late game can sort of trigger in. But not in the same way that Pygmalion just wants to stall. Stelle just wants to survive, so that once her altitude is in the correct range for her damage to come online, that she triggers and goes. So she has tools like Flash Grenade that dazes for a long time, and we'll see some more later on. Some even better and spicier surviving mechanics. But for now, we have Flare Gun, her next item. Every 6 seconds, with 3 ammo, deal 3 damage and 3 burn. And when you buy this, gain 3 speed. 3 speed isn't a crazy amount, but this one, all the 3s, except for the cooldown, which is 6. Flare Gun, I'm not really seeing 3 damage, 3 burn. Reapplying 3 burn is nice. But unless Stelle has some sort of ammo mechanics, I'm not seeing where Flare Gun gets its strength. But we could be missing some stuff. Anyway, moving on, we have the Hanger. Every 2 seconds, well, after 2 seconds, I should say, replace this with 1 or 2 vehicles for this fight. So it's a large building. I assume it means it will replace it with a large item, or a large vehicle, or a medium and a small vehicle. Which would be really interesting. I can't wait to see this just go ham. And you have plus 25 armor while you own this. It is a large item, so it's going to take up a lot of space. But this hanger could be really fun. It's going to be one of those inconsistent things. There are very few times or spaces in the Bazaar where there is true sort of RNG that could win you or lose you the game. Hanger is one of them. But you will see it very, very early on in the fight. So we'll see. You could get some really good shit. You could get some absolutely useless stuff. For example, if you're playing like a general like low altitude build, and your hanger pops out a Bon Voyage, and you're dealing 3 times like 5 altitude every 9 seconds or 10 seconds. It's not gonna be great.
Bazaar.
That nearly got me. That nearly got me. I like a small little jump. Anyway, moving on to the item that we kind of nerded out about when we first sort of realized what it was. The lightning rod. Every 20 seconds, so long cooldown, you become immune to damage for 4 seconds. However, at the start of the fight, use this. So this is what we were talking about. Stelle wants to survive those first few seconds so she can get her altitude up and then really start to swing into things and deal some mega damage. So her lightning rod just flat out making you immune to damage for 4 seconds. That's incredible. Like, that's going to give her the space she needs. And like, so, a little bit of context. We've just heard this sort of past week or so that they are experimenting with the option to choose from 3 opponents at the end of the day. And that Deborah, the Nexus, I think she was called, could up that to 5. So, Lightning Rod, I would look at this pre that information and go, okay, this is a little risky. If you go up against a Vanessa, that's insane. You're going to destroy her. Her entire burst is going to be wasted, and then you'll just win. If you're going up against a Pygmalion or a Jules, Pygmalion is just going to outlast you anyway. He doesn't want the fight to go quickly. And Jules doesn't care for immunity to damage. She's just going to feed you. So, you know, it's going to be temperamental using Lightning Rod. However, you can potentially now choose your opponent. So if you're running a Lightning Rod Stelle build, you will pick maybe some other Stelles. You will pick Vanessa for sure. And if you had to choose, maybe you pick Jules or Pygmalion. Dooley and Mac, we don't know what they do yet. But yeah, you're looking to pick Vanessa because you know she's going to trigger early and you're going to immune at least some of her important damage. Managed to make that like a 12-second cooldown, it could be awesome. I mean, that's the other nice thing from Lightning Rod. If you are against a Pygmalion who's going for Sandstorm, this is going to trigger twice. And if they don't change the Sandstorm from 30 seconds to 40 seconds, this is definitely going to trigger 3 times. So you will get, what, in a 40-second fight, 12 seconds of immunity from that? That's pretty strong. Anyway, moving swiftly on, we have the Marshalling Lights. Every 7 seconds, lose 2 altitude, and when you drop to 0 altitude, heal for 25. A nice item, a little bit of healing. It's not much healing, but if you have something that pops you up to and then back down to quite regularly, I mean every 7 seconds, you're going to get some healing from this. It's probably more a way of managing your altitude, I would have to say. You know, losing 2 altitude, maybe that's what takes you up and down that 10 altitude threshold for your bombs to go off from your Karakar. Next up, we have an adorable item, the Paper Plane. Every 7 seconds, deal 2 damage, and you multicast this equal to the number of your vehicles. This is fun. So, it itself is a vehicle, so that's going to be 1 multicast. So it's going to be 2 casts, 2 Paper Planes every time you throw it. It probably works with itself, so you could line up 10 Paper Planes, and they would trigger 10 times each. That's kind of crazy. But even just like, so anything that says multicast, even if it's dualcast, tricast, octocast, whatever it is, adding damage to this is incredibly strong. So if you can add some strength to Stelle, or if you can just add some damage to Paper Plane, if you have a couple of vehicles, this can start racking up some cool damage. Looking at Propeller, every 3 maybe seconds, we think, possibly, gain 10 speed and gain 10 altitude. I imagine this is a question mark because they would have had altitude when this was, they would have had speed when this was looked at. So 3 seconds is a guess. 10 speed, 10 altitude, not bad. 10 altitude, gaining 10 altitude would be good for the sort of high altitude builds, especially every 3 seconds. This is probably going to be one of your key items to get you up to that high altitude, if that's what you need. And then speed, we've seen, is probably, at least as far as I can tell right now, speed is probably one of Stelle's highest win conditions, or biggest win conditions. She seemed to be pretty weak. The single exception, the only time we saw her do relatively well in the last build, was when she just generated a ridiculous amount of speed from the engine that they had. And they were able to just stay alive. They were able to keep firing things off, so Reynad couldn't finish them. Unfortunately, he eventually did. We still haven't seen Stelle win, but those high-speed builds looked the strongest in the last update. Moving on, we have Rivet Gun. Every 6 seconds, deal 8 damage, and when an adjacent vehicle is used, advance an adjacent weapon by 1 second. Whew! So that sounds almost unusable until you realize that paper plane is a vehicle and a weapon. So every 7 seconds when a paper plane is used, advance the other paper plane by 1 second. And then when that's used, you advance this one by 1 second. If we look up, Bon Voyage, Caracara, they are also weapons and vehicles. So that combination seems quite regular. It shouldn't be too difficult to use. How strong it is, we're not entirely sure. Stelle generally is kind of weak right now. Moving on to Sandbags, every 7 seconds, gain 2 altitude, and then deal damage equal to your altitude twice. Or twice your altitude, as it says here. So Sandbags, you'll want to be using this with something like Propeller to sort of increase your altitude so that when you hit for your altitude's worth of damage, it's going to be a nice big swing. And like I was saying, I think this is where I kind of imagine her strong-ish builds being at the moment. Not relying too heavily on any sort of large combination of things, but instead getting to a score and altitude and doubling it, or staying at a low altitude and then using, we'll see, one of the next items. Alright, moving on, we have the Squirrel Suit. What an item this is. Every 8.8 seconds, we think, probably more like 9 or 10, because we've got to factor in speed. You gain speed equal to your altitude for this fight, and then lose 2 altitude. So, and at the start of the fight, gain 5 altitude. So, this, again, really nice combo with your Sandbags, your Propeller, to get you up to a high altitude, get your speed churning. You then lose to altitude with this, but that'll be hopefully off-put by the Propeller and the Sandbags, and then start dealing damage based on your altitude. Personally, based on the cards we've seen, this is the only build we really know of. At that and like spamming 10 paper planes with some strength. But yeah, that sort of high altitude build is the only one we've really spotted so far. But hopefully we get to see some more Stelle builds soon. Hopefully she gets some love, and we can see all of her builds be strong. This is also a gear subtype, so maybe Stelle has multiple subtypes. We're not sure. She has weapons, she has vehicles, and now this is a gear. The last item for Stelle is her Windbreaker, which looks pretty cozy. Every 8 seconds, lose 8 altitude, and when you land, which assumedly means 0 altitude, gain 35 shield. So this looks good. It looks alright. You know, gain 35 shield is not bad whenever you land. But this item by itself, every 8 seconds can make you land if you have the perfect setup. Which, you know, let's not forget, it's going to be difficult to have the perfect setup. But even then, every 8 seconds, gain 35 shield. That's not remotely anywhere near as strong as Pygmalion's shielding, for instance. So yeah, Stelle's going to have to be seeing some love before she really makes it big. But I can't wait to see what they do with her. And maybe her other items really pull it all together, I don't know. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more Stelle in future builds. And at least, we actually got to see her in a build. It's been really, really exciting to see both her and Jules, who we'll see, in a build. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, without further ado, let me take a look at some of the Jules cards. So, starting off strong, we have Cookies. Every 3.6 seconds, it feeds for 18, and its passive is all foods feed +1. So it's a handy thing to have. It'll just give you a rough sort of increase. It is a small item, so you can fit many of these in on your board. This 3.6 seconds is exceptionally low for the current version of the game. However, this was taken from basically a single build that may have had some speed, so take that with a pinch of salt, but it'll be around the 4, maybe 5 second mark. Cornucopia is the next item. Every 6.4 seconds, as far as we know, it feeds for 7. And when you feed, give this item 5 feed for the fight. So cookies are triggering regularly, and I mean regularly. And this thing is getting an extra 5 feed for every time that the enemy is fed. Feed and fed, important distinctions. Just listen for it. It's going to get confusing. It's going to get tricky. But get used to me talking about feeding and fed on this channel because, man, I'm looking to love Jules. Yeah, cornucopia should be able to spiral out of control quite easily, especially with cookies alongside them. This is, by the way, a medium item, and it is an ingredient, because we have the ingredient subtype or archetype for Jules. So we haven't seen too much sort of ingredient name calling like we have with Aquatic. But keep an eye out for it. We've only got 5 cards so far. We'll get more. Speaking of those cards, Feast is up next. Every 10.9 seconds, the effect is 25 feed and 100 health to both players. And use all other food items. Should have mentioned this before. Food is almost like Jules' weapon sort of item tag. A lot of her items have the food tag on them. So yeah, the Feast will, at 10 seconds, give both players 100 health. Thank you very much. But also give both players 25 feed. This only backfires if they're also playing Jules. So yeah. Nice little card here, mainly because use all other food items. So this triggers, giving Cornucopia 5 feed. It triggers Cornucopia, giving Cornucopia 5 feed. And it triggers cookies, giving Cornucopia 5 feed for each of those cookies. So yeah, it's you can see where the motor came from in the game that Reynad lost, or the match. Ice Cubes is next up, and this was the other sort of important factor to Reynad's loss. Every 6.8 seconds, it freezes for 2 seconds. However, when you use adjacent food items, also freeze for 2 seconds. So if you plant a pair of cookies down either side of this, firing every 3.6 seconds, freezing them for 2 seconds, you can almost permafreeze, well, you can more than permafreeze one item. So you can permafreeze one item and like regularly freeze another item. And in the fight that we saw, Reynad had 3 big items and nothing else. So this absolutely shut his ability down. Now, Reynad was trying to heal and shield with a lot of those items, which isn't necessarily the most useful thing against Jules, because she'll be feeding you beneath that. There's not too much damage to heal back. But the all important thing he was doing is stopping his Lion Cane, his big damage item from triggering. So yeah, this can be a very scary ingredient, but not food. Only an ingredient. To really stall out those large builds. Won't be too useful against a small item Vanessa build. Last but not least, we have the Purple Pumpkin, and among Looking Glorious, every 9.1 seconds it feeds for 12. And when you use an adjacent food item, give that 3 feed for the fight. So you can start to picture this build of cookies, ice cubes, cookies, purple pumpkin, cookies, cornucopia, feast, or something like that. I don't even know if that's possible to fit all of that, but you'll get close to that. And yeah, you can really start ramping up your food production. And as Reynad found out, make the enemy pop. So yeah, Jules looks incredibly, incredibly fun. I can't wait to play her. Let me know what you think of Jules and her mechanic in the description below. I am, like I say, super excited to play her. She might not be my first purchase because she's sort of got a bit of a weird mechanic going on, but she'll definitely be one of them. Probably the second purchase that I make, because I cannot wait to play her and have this unique mechanic to mess around with. And of course, the aesthetic of Jules. She looks awesome. Can't wait to play her. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm being Games by Greg, and I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.